In anticipation of Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, today I'm sharing the recipe for kurma. As you know or may not know, kurma is one of the sweet Indian delicacies that's included in a bag of prasad that's distributed at the end of pujas, prayers, weddings, or religious ceremonies. Kurma comes in many sizes, shapes, and shades. I've already shared the gulab jamun recipe in the top left corner, but today I'm going to share my mother-in-law's recipe for kurma. In my humble opinion, her kurma is the most flavorful and the best I've ever eaten, and that's compared to some of the break-your-teeth, flavorless kurma that's sold commercially. This recipe makes about 4.5 to 5 pounds of kurma. I've thought about sharing a recipe with a smaller quantity, but after making it and sharing and eating, there never seems to be quite enough. So I'm going to leave it at this. If you wish to reduce the amount or reduce the recipe in half, feel free to do so. For this recipe, you'll need a few basic ingredients: all-purpose flour, cold evaporated milk, cold condensed milk, cold butter. You'll also need your spices, ground cinnamon, ground cardamom, also known as elaichi, and grated ginger. For the sugar syrup that's used to coat the kurma at the end of cooking, you'll just need sugar, water, and the optional ginger. Here are a few items you'll need. You'll definitely need a bowl to knead the flour in, your measuring spoons, and your measuring cup to measure the water and evaporated milk. Next, you'll need a pot to fry the kurma in. You'll also need a knife in order to cut the kurma into strips, a slotted spoon to stir the kurma and to remove it from the pot. A paper towel lined tray will be helpful as well to put the kurma in when you're done. A pot also will be needed for the sugar syrup. And at the end of cooking, you will need a very large bowl in which to pour the syrup onto the kurma to finish it off. This recipe calls for 2.5 pounds of all-purpose flour. You could take a 5-pound bag of flour and divide it in half, or you can use a scale, whatever works for you. Next, we'll add the cinnamon, the cardamom, and the ginger. Next, we will cut the butter into cubes and add it to the flour, and then using our fingers, we will rub it into the flour until it resembles fine crumbs, just like a pastry dough. Next, add the evaporated milk and the condensed milk. You can certainly add this gradually like you do when you're kneading a roti flour, but I got a little bit carried away here. Fortunately, it didn't turn out too bad. This seems to be a little challenging because it's very sticky, but if you employ the grab and squeeze method, like I taught you in my other videos as well, it really helps to bring the dough together quickly, or quicker. Next, we will knead for about 10 to 15 minutes to form a smooth, firm dough. If it seems to be taking too long to come together and it still looks dry, feel free to add more evaporated milk. Next, I'm moving on to my famous knuckle press method, and this is just going to help bring it more together. As you can see, it still appears very dry, so add some more evaporated milk at this point if your dough looks like this. This is definitely a good workout, but I assure you success is right around the corner. Just keep on pressing. At this point, I was really giving up. I thought I had done something wrong. It was taking too long to come together. I placed a call to Trinidad. I called my mother-in-law. She said to make it into a ball, put it into the fridge, and it will eventually come together. And it did. Divide the dough into 3 pieces. I only did 2 for this video, and form into balls. Place it on a tray or in a bowl, covered, and refrigerate for 10 to 15 minutes. Now it's time to fry the kurma, and we will place a large pot over medium heat, and we'll add about 6 cups of oil, or enough to deep fry. On the side, we will line a large bowl or sheet tray with brown paper bags or parchment paper or paper towels. And while the oil is coming to temperature, and that is very hot, we'll remove 1 ball of dough, or loya as we call it, from the refrigerator. We'll place it on a counter, a chowki, or a flat surface, and using a rolling pin, what we call bilna in Trinidad, we'll roll the dough to the thinness of about 1/8 of an inch, just like a roti dough. We will not use any dry flour at this point because when we're frying, the oil will brown very quickly. Instead, I'm going to rub vegetable oil on the palm of my hands as required to continue to flatten, smoothen, and to keep the dough moist. The challenge here is rolling it out evenly, but it's certainly not impossible. Just keep going until you get it right. Do not apply too heavy of a pressure on the dough. Just light rolling strokes. Next, using a knife, we will cut out the dough vertically from top to bottom into strips, 1 to 1.5 inches wide. Next, you have a few options. Like my mother-in-law does, she would lift each strip and roll it between the palm of her hands to resemble a rope. Then she'll place it back on the counter and cut it into 1-inch pieces. This is not the typical shape of kurma, but this is her preferred method of shaping. The method I'm showing you here is the traditional method. Without rolling, I'm cutting into thin diagonal strips. To test if the oil is the right temperature, we added a few pieces to the hot oil. Instead of cutting each strip diagonally, which takes a whole lot of time, here's a quicker method I devised for you. This method still requires patience. Now that the oil is very hot, we will place the pieces carefully into the hot oil and we will fry until dark golden brown. Once you place it in the pot, do not stir it immediately and do not try to separate the pieces in the oil as it will separate itself. Once you see it's separated, turn frequently. Using a spider strainer, remove the kurma from the oil and place on the lined sheet trays to drain and cool completely. Then we will repeat with the remaining dough. Here's an important lesson to be learned, my friends. If you accidentally overcrowded the pan because of your impatience, you will notice that the kurma starts to expand somehow in the pot. At this point, do not stir, because if you start stirring, it's going to break apart, fall apart, and that's the end of it. So be very gentle, just allow it to cook, and it will turn out okay. But the next time, please do not crowd the pot. Remove it from the hot oil and place it on a single layer on a paper towel lined tray. While you're getting ready to fry the last bit of kurma in a saucepan over medium heat, we'll bring water and sugar and ginger to a gentle boil. We'll boil for about 30 to 45 minutes or until it starts to get frothy, bubbly, syrupy, and or starts to coat the spoon and sugar crystals start to form at the side of the pot. It's about 230 degrees Fahrenheit on a candy thermometer. Once it gets to that point, we'll keep it on a low flame until we're ready to use. While that's boiling, we will finish cutting the kurma and frying. As I've said before, I only made 2 layers, but I suggest you make 3 or more to make it more manageable for you, especially if you're using a smaller pot to fry it in as well. Next, place the kurma into a very large bowl or basin and allow it to cool completely. As you can see, we're not completely ready here yet. We'll give it a minute more. The bubbling is still very active. There are 4 clues that show that this sugar syrup is ready. There are lots of bubbles developing inside of the pot. There are sugar crystals forming at the side as well. The movement of the bubbles appear to be very sluggish, and the syrup is coating the spoon. Now that the kurma has cooled, we will pour the sugar syrup gradually all over the kurma, not just in one place like the dye is doing here, and we will stir quickly and gently to coat it completely. If you don't put enough sugar syrup, it's not going to be as crunchy. And using a clean spoon, no oil on the spoon, mix it until the kurma is evenly coated. You'll continue turning until the sugar dries, hardens, and the kurma is coated with a white layer. At any point, if it's very sticky, just keep stirring. It will eventually dry. Don't give up. Some of the kurma is breaking up because of the spoon, so we're going to utilize a different technique, moving it side to side in order to coat the kurma and to make sure that the kurma does not stick together. After the initial stirring, this is quite an effective method. Let's be realistic, friends. At some point you'll zone out and the kurma may be too dark for your liking. Just forgive yourself. And there may also be that set of kurma you gave the responsibility of finishing up to someone else and it ended up appearing like this. Let me tell you, don't fret yourself. You will realize that this is just or even more delicious than the big batch you made. Until next time, my friends, leave a comment below and happy cooking.